So in the end, so I hate being on phone calls. If you phone me, I'll hang up and then send you an email saying, well, sorry, I lost you. What were you saying? Can you just write it down for me so I have a paper trail? I hate it. I got in the habit of, just for my own amusement, and like, it's really common, especially at work in the UK, that when you hang up on someone on a professional call, you say, cheers. This is really petty, but instead of saying cheers, I would say jizz, like Jizz, jizz. Because if you hear them over the phone, they're almost indistinguishable. Look, I'll tell you what, let me get a phone and I'll demonstrate. Let me get an actual phone. 1 second. Just wait there. Yeah, hello, yeah, it's me. Yeah, no, look, it's no problem. Yeah, no, I'll have it to you by the end of the day. Alright, thanks, mate. Alright, cheers. And I've been doing this now for 20 years, and no one has ever called me out on it. But I like to think that there are now 2 decades of people that have left a phone call with me just going, did that guy just say, did I hear that right? Did he just say jizz? Nah. Hello, yeah, it's me again, look. Anyway, look, I have to go. I'm about to tell a bunch of internet strangers about the time I got fired from the dildo factory because I was a drunk. Alright, okay, cheers. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bad Country. And forgive me being scruffy and disorganised today, but I'm going out and I just wanted to get something in the camera. I just wanted this story has to come out of me. I'm so excited to talk about this, it's going to be hard to listen to. And for me, it's going to be very hard to stay on track because this is a very sprawling story. But to set the scene for what happens at the end, we have to start at the beginning about how and why I ended up doing the weird job that I do. So if you're unfamiliar, I provide marketing services to sex toy companies and adult brands, pleasure brands, and I've been doing it now for, I'm 40, so technically 22 years. But my first paid writing gig was for a phone sex company. And the younger people in my audience, I know there are some of you, are going to find this hard to believe. But in the olden days, there used to be physical phones. A phone wasn't this piece of gossamer glass, this ethereal piece of technology in your pocket and that you carry around with you. Your phone was like that clunky thing. It was a thing that lived in your house. Or if you didn't have one in your house, there was a community telephone, a shared one, like in a box in your little quiet countryside village in England. A little red box, and you would go there and you'd set a time, like when you meet a person, I'll call you at 6:30 p.m. Then you have to go there at 6:30 p.m. and they're waiting by their phone, and you pick it up and you have a conversation. And occasionally you can hear other people's conversations too. If you get like a cross line, you can hear other people talking and they can hear you, but you can't talk to each other. It was a wild time. And for a long time, phone sex lines it was a service, a very expensive one, that you would go to and you would call, and some anonymous, smoky-voiced housewife would say explicit and dirty sexual things to you. And you would pay like £2.50 a minute for this. And the goal was that she would drag out what she was saying, which was usually a recording, for as long as possible, to try to tease as much money as possible, while these guys are just thumping big, heavy British coins with a metallic clunk into the shared payphone until he had finished what he came to do and would leave this publicly accessible phone box covered in jizz. Cheers. And that was a completely legitimate industry for a long time. But what you don't know is that those recordings that those smoky-voiced housewives had to record, they were done to scripts. They were not spontaneous. And those scripts had to be written by somebody. And my first paid writing job was doing that. Writing scripts for phone sex lines before I was probably old enough to call one myself. And then I knew I knew earlier than that I wanted to work in the adult industry in one form or another, and in the end I managed to make it happen. But that was my inauspicious start. And look, if you are an adult industry type or a type of politics that are like mine, I'm aware that there is some deeply problematic content on those things. It was not exactly a progressive sexual space. And I apologise for any lasting harm I did. But I contributed to thousands of anonymous public orgasms. And even at the time, even as sleazy as that industry was, I found like a little kernel of voyeuristic thrill in that pleasure that I provided to strangers across the land. But after that, it was like, I was never going to be Prime Minister with that on my CV. It was the adult industry or nothing for me. And I took a job after university. I took a job for this young web design agency, and this is about now 2005. Something like that, 2006 maybe. And this web design agency, I was a copywriter. I wrote website copy for early e-commerce websites. Not super early, but much like 22 years ago. And this company also owned a sex toy website, which at the time was called getmepleasure.com, part of a network of businesses owned by that agency that specialised in niche industries. So they also sold water dispensers, and that was called getmewater.com, and fitness equipment, that was getmefitness.com, and one of them was getmepleasure.com, a sex toy business. And that was the most successful one, weirdly, out of this family of businesses. And I was good at what I did and showed some interest in it, and was approached by the business owner and asked if I wanted to go full-time on that business too, working with another guy called Dan, who's still in my life. He was the general manager and I was like the marketing manager, even though I was only like 21, 22 years old. And that was my start. Like, our stockroom when we began was a lift, an elevator that was in the web design agency's office. That was what we used as our sex toy stockroom. Everything went into the lift, and all the staff had to use the stairs. And when we when we had got an order, because we were working in the same office to start with, you'd have to summon the lift, and the dildos would come down and emerge from this Schindler elevator. And I used to handle the customer service. And when somebody asked me if we had a product in stock, they would call up, and I would have to go, okay, wait, I'm just going to go and check if that's in stock. Hold on to the phone. Go and summon the lift. Wait. Open the door, look through the boxes. Yep, there is a realistic veiny dildo here. Go back. Yep, we have that in stock for you. All right, cheers. But we made a go of it. We made a go, and I was there, half running the front end of the company for something like 3 years. And back in those early days, it was really the industry, the whole internet and e-commerce and marketing was very fizzy, and everything felt new and dynamic. And you had to have your elbows out a little bit to cut some space for you. And I learned some really innovative marketing techniques which carry me through to this day, that you don't learn in mainstream marketing, that are absolutely just essential to my skill set, like community management, loyalty building, brand awareness, marketing in unusual ways when the normal marketing avenues are shut to you because you are an adult business. All of those just come naturally to me. You cut me down, you cut me open, and I bleed adult industry now. It's not so much, it's a bit like sobriety. It's not something that I do, it's what I am. We competed for 3 years. We were a name on the radar of British pleasure brands. And we were competing with what would emerge as the largest brand, a company called lovehoney.co.uk back then. We were kind of shoulder to shoulder with them very briefly until they accelerated astronomically. And then I moved to a more professional, I was kind of headhunted. I moved to a more professional British pleasure brand called Ann Summers in London, and I was there. It's like lingerie and diddlers. Like cheap lingerie and cheap sex toys. If you've ever heard of a rampant rabbit, that's their trademark. That's what they're famous for. A company that is Ann Summers is a company that is perpetually in financial trouble. It's been going bankrupt since I was there 20 years ago. And there I was on their brand marketing team, where I was able to bring a little bit of professionalism and polish to my kind of scruffy and dynamic marketing style. They had a budget, for example, and they didn't have to rely on going to internet chat rooms and spamming forums and that kind of thing like I did. And after 4 or 5 years in London, I was again moved over to a luxury pleasure brand, this time in Shanghai, and that brand is called Lelo, L-E-L-O. And when I was there, the western side of the business was headquartered in China, because all of their production facilities are there. And there I was the global brand manager. And if you know anything about my story, if you've watched previous Bad Country story times, when I'm talking about gold-plated vibrators and stuff, that's where that was happening. That business that did it then and continues to do it still. Very high-end premium pleasure brand with my dumb, rubbery face in control of the brand. During my time at Lelo, that was the time that I worked with Charlie Sheen. After his HIV positive diagnosis, we hired him to be the face of a new condom brand that we launched called Lelo Hex. It was me that did all the creative content for that. I worked with him directly, wrote scripts for him, and gave him prompts to use in his speeches for the product and that kind of thing. A consummate professional at the height of his own addiction. If you've seen that new documentary on Netflix, which I want to talk about a little bit, he kind of covers that period. That was the period that I worked with him, at the height of my own addiction. And I was there for a long time. It was my work there that eventually, again, if you're familiar with my story, if you're not, I'll bring you up to speed. So I was in Shanghai 5 years, suffered a head injury. My alcoholism really got on top of me in China. That's where things started to go sideways. Throughout my entire adult life, beginning as a student, my drinking was always out of control. But it was out of control within the tolerances of my peer group, if that makes sense. I was already alcohol dependent in my mid-20s. I took a short break from it to focus on fitness and martial arts. But even then, after a short period of sobriety, teetotalism as I called it then, because I was too afraid of calling myself an alcoholic and therefore too much of a pussy to call myself sober as well. I called it teetotal. It was in China after a serious head injury that happened in a bicycle accident that the drinking and the reckless behaviour and the sex and the casual violence and stuff, it all started to emerge. After that head injury, my drinking got out of control really quickly, and I broke up with my long-term girlfriend, who returned to England. And I started taking other substances as well, becoming a little bit too familiar with getting things delivered by a guy in a taxi that would send him and I to prison for life if the Chinese authorities knew what was happening. And I knew there was a problem, and the way that I tried to solve it was not by seeking therapy or speaking to a medical professional, but by jumping on a bike and attempting to ride from Shanghai to London on my own. Because that's how men of my generation deal with our problems. We don't seek help, we challenge ourselves. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to test my fortitude against the coarseness of the world and see how tough I really was, and take this drinking problem and all of my mental health issues that were unaddressed and just take them out into the Taklamakan desert and strangle them in the sand and leave them behind me. Dumb, stupid, naive. But for a couple of months on the road it worked, and I was sober and I was getting better. But then a series of traumatic experiences, which are all covered in my book, Just Crazy Enough to Work, linked in the description if you'd like to know more about this. It all went very wrong very quickly, and I crossed into Kyrgyzstan and then into Kazakhstan, where everything went wrong. It was far more traumatic. The bike was stolen, I was robbed repeatedly, I was an out of control alcoholic. I got deported, arrested for punching a cop, arrested, spent a week in prison, put on trial in Russian, a language I didn't speak and not provided a translator in the courtroom, and then deported the same day where I flew. The only flight I could get immediately was to Baku in Azerbaijan, where I spent another month homeless and alcoholic, until the British Embassy, eventually I lost my passport and had to seek an emergency travel document. And the British Embassy forced me on a flight while I was withdrawing from alcohol, and sent me back to London. And I was in England for 6 weeks before I decided that I was cured and wanted to return to my job at Lelo, now based in Zagreb in Croatia. And I returned there and I was not better. And as soon as I turned up there I was. Turned up with the same drinking problem, the same unaddressed mental health issues, and the same brain injury. And it got out of control immediately there. And I managed to hold on to my job for a couple of months before they said, you know what, fuck this guy needs to go and get treatment. And I moved back to England, took a fishing cottage, and was kept on a retaining contract by this business. So, let me back up. The guy that hired me originally to Lelo, I'm going to call him John for this, that's not his real name. But John is a thread of this story. So John is the guy who hired me out of Ann Summers and moved me into Shanghai to come and work at Lelo. And he's also the guy who fought for me to be able to leave the company for the 8 months or so that my bike trip would take, and kept my job open when it re-emerged in Zagreb 8 months later. When I moved over there, he was a director in the business and a good personal friend. He supported me in Zagreb. It was him that found me drunk and asleep, having walked out of a hospital after a brush with death. He took me into his own home and eventually put me on a plane, I think with his own money, back to London to get treatment. It was him that fought for me to keep a retaining contract so that I might return to Lelo after I'd sorted myself out. He had left in the time that it took. In the move over from Shanghai, none of the staff are happy about it. We all loved Shanghai. And he disappeared from Lelo and then popped up, ironically, at Love Honey, the business that I had been competing with in the early days of my career. In my time at Lelo, Love Honey had accelerated its growth and was worth hundreds of millions of pounds by now. And John had gone to a company called Wowtech, based in Berlin, which merged when I was there. He was the guy who fought to have me come to the business in Berlin. So he is the guy building my career for me, supporting me professionally and as a truly good friend this whole time. He moved me to Berlin to come with him at Wowtech, which then merged with Love Honey in a merger valued £1.2 billion. That established Love Honey Group, which owned now all of the biggest brands that you might have heard of in the industry. Womanizer, WeVibe, Romp, Arcwave, some lube brands, a million others, 50 Shades of Grey, all of the sex toys from that series that are featured in the show, in the movies. Those are Love Honey owned brands and toys. And E.L. James, the writer of 50 Shades, gets a commission on every single 50 Shades sex toy sold at lovehoney.com. Goes directly to her pocket. The industry, man. But I would add, even if this video is slightly sloppy and disordered, if you're getting any pleasure or an interest at all from this video, do please like and subscribe. And if you're actually getting any pleasure from it, if this is the kind of sobriety content you think has been missing from your journey, if you really want to engage and speak to me directly, then head over to the Patreon. The link is in the description. There is a free tier where I do some kind of basic free content, and also a paid one where there's tons of behind the scenes stuff. So go there. There's an amazing community of sober people who would be happy to have you. Anyway, back to the story. Jizz. The truth is, when I got to Berlin, I took the alcoholism with me. I had a sober year and a half there, something like that, and was medicated when I arrived. I stopped the medication and flew solo for a while. But then everything crept back in. I got into a new weird relationship with someone who was a wine enthusiast, and I quickly relapsed. And all of it came back. And the same guy who'd been fighting with me all this time, after a period of relapses, eventually it had become too much for the business to handle. And that same guy who had been supporting me now for 10 years, personally and professionally, and medically and financially, he was the guy who had to let me go. And that's the story, after all of that context, that I'm going to talk about today. Brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, half an hour in. Let's begin. Man, this is making me nostalgic. Like, part of the reason why I didn't fit, jumping ahead a little bit already, part of the reason I didn't work in Berlin, I didn't fit in there, was because I arrived in Germany with all of this scrappy kind of startup, elbows out kind of marketing experience at this very sophisticated and slick, professional, business-like marketing machine with a €250,000 per month Google ad budget. The kind of money I'd never seen before. It was alien to me. I was used to working on no money and grafting, working long hours and really committing to a business. And I ended up in this actual business. And it reminded me how much I missed those early days of the adult industry. Like the 2006 to 2013-14 period were a real halcyon age for people like me. People who had an active interest in sex and sexuality. That period of the internet spawned a lot of people like me. And a lot of people who are still successful in the industry came from that kind of fizzy era. You know, a lot of the people who are now running the big businesses like Playboy and similar ones are people like me who came from that period. For me, I could have been one of those people. My career projection, my career trajectory might sound unusual to you. But to be honest, I was born of the internet. I was on the internet at exactly the right age, at the right time. People in 1,000 years from now are going to be jealous of me for having been born at exactly the right time for human sexuality, a thing that I had an interest in, and internet culture, another thing that I had an interest in, to merge at the same time. I was there. And I was there at a time when it's conjectured that 80% of internet traffic in 1999 was adult content. The entire internet, if you think that I'm unusual, the whole internet was porn and sex forums. It wasn't just me, I'm not alone in this. If you remember this period, back me up in the comments, or leave a like if you remember Usenet and that kind of thing. That was the internet. It was sex. And even now, you think there's an adult content problem on the internet now. Estimations are that it represents about 14% of internet traffic today. It was 80% in the late 90s. In your face, young people. So, during the pandemic is when I moved, and the very last day before they closed the borders is the day that I flew into Berlin. And I landed in Berlin, and I met this corporate culture which didn't suit me, didn't suit my personality. And after a year and a half, I felt a familiar discontent. And it was that discontent that drove me back to the bottle. I had relapsed during the interview process. I'd had my first major bumps with relapses. Period of sobriety, went to Berlin for the interview, drank, came back to the UK drunk, and had a couple of rough patches, but eventually got a handle on it for a year and a half. But the corporate culture grated on me. How professional I suddenly had to be, where everybody was in this business was talking about how it was a flat hierarchy, and it wasn't. It was the same old boys club with this straight white men, this boys club at the top, pretending to be super progressive but just super weren't. The same old guff that I'd seen a million times. They are the problem with my industry. It's the rich people. They fucked the industry up. And it clashed with me. And I could tell that I wasn't performing as well as... working under so much constraints and to such dogmatic deadlines. I'm just not that kind of person, if you can't already tell. I'm disorganized in my personality. I do great creative work, but it's like that disorganization is part of it. Being able to think openly and to go where my thoughts lead and to be allowed some freedom. All of that was taken away at Lovehoney. But when I went to them in Berlin, they became Lovehoney. They were suddenly worth £1.2 billion. And I had no interest in that. I wanted to work with small businesses who cared. There was a certain cognitive dissonance between how I felt about myself and how I perceived myself and how I perceived my work. And it led me partially to drink, or it led me partially to spiral out. So, when I had moved out to Shanghai, in fact I remember now, it was 2014. So I remember that because we were on the way to Ukraine, to Kiev, when Russia invaded the first time. You might forget that Russia already invaded Ukraine in 2014, but we were on the way to the airport when that happened. And we had to turn around, go back to Poland, and then go through Belarus and on into Russia that way, by train, rather than flying from Kiev. We had to bribe a Belarusian passport official with a box of Ferrero Rocher in order to be able to get the visa for Belarus. And jump on a train. That's how I ended up on the Trans-Siberian. And the reason I mentioned that is because Russia invaded Ukraine again just shortly before my 38th birthday, in 2022. And that was when I was spinning out. It was in early 2022, before my birthday, in end of February that year. My birthday's 1st of March. And that was the day that I picked up the phone to the Ukrainian embassy in Berlin and offered to go and fight in Ukraine. So Ukraine was offering citizenship and to arm anyone who showed up in Ukraine to fight Russia. No offense to my Russian friends who are watching this. It's nothing personal. In fact, the vast majority of actual Russians that I've met in Russia and outside have been amazing. I love Russian people. I love the country of Russia. Unfortunately, the Russian government is where I draw the line. So nothing in particular against the people of Russia. In my experience, you've always been fun and hospitable and weird, crazy, great people to be around. But the nature of the politics means that we have to diverge. And I'd offered to go and fight. That was how much I was spinning out. That I called the embassy, left my details, and a couple of days later, after my birthday, I'd started drinking again. And I got a phone call from an anonymous number, this time in a British accent, who contacted me to ask if I had volunteered to go and fight in Ukraine. And I said yes, and they explained in detail how British bodies turning up on Ukrainian battlefields might actually expand the conflict rather than end it. And the argument was so powerful, even though I was spinning out with mental health and depression and like just lashing out and alcohol and sex and stuff. Even though that was a very rough period, that was an argument that made perfect sense to me. And I withdrew the idea completely. It was such a powerful statement to me, and the fact that they had called me personally to try to persuade me not to do it really meant something. It still does. And you have to remember, back then we thought it was going to be a very short conflict and that Russia would be stopped at a border. We didn't expect it to be 300,000 dead in a 3-year conflict. And we thought it was going to be a small territorial one. And I found Russia's invasion to be not just an invasion of Ukraine, but an invasion of Europe. And as someone who considers myself more European than British, I was very unstable around this time. The relapses had become more common and much more destructive. And just, I was unpredictable. And most people get more conservative as they get older, right? I didn't. I got more activist as I got older. And I took on social causes that had nothing to do with me and was fighting for stuff that I shouldn't have. And it wasn't really because of my good social conscience, it was because I just wanted the fight. I felt something missing, and I was replacing it with alcohol and with the desire for the fight. So while I was trying to fight in Ukraine, I was picking fights all over the place, both physical ones, but also kind of conceptual ones, fighting for people's rights. And Berlin is a hotspot for that kind of thing. Even though I was about to turn 40 back then, in my late 30s, I should have mellowed out. I didn't mellow out. I was more likely to go and flip over a cop car at 39 than I was at 29 than I was at 19. Right? It's why I partially why I still have a problem with the police. It's why I probably why I punched a policeman in Kazakhstan. The fact that he stole my passport, I was in the process of trying to take it away from me so that I could have to bribe him to get it back. That's incidental. If he had been a taxi driver or something, I would have paid the bribe. Because he was a cop, that's why I threw the punch. And what I had done, secretly, with a couple of other members of the Love Honey team, is I had tried to establish a union inside the business. The German version of a union. I won't bore you with the details, but in all essences, in all important details, it is a workers' union inside the business, right? And in my mind, I was telling myself that what I was doing was defending the rights and the beliefs of the younger, kind of more progressive people coming up behind me, using my seniority in the business to try to fight for the rights for underrepresented people that the company kept hiring, but wasn't really doing a good job of protecting, like non-binary people, for example, of which there were a growing number on the team, both in the US team and the German team. I didn't feel they were well protected by the business's own rules, so I started a union. And it did not go well. If you know anything about unions or starting unions inside businesses, you would know that the business owners do not like it, right? They don't enjoy it. And the owner of Love Honey, look, this is a trade secret, but you look at Love Honey, the biggest sex toy company in the world by a measurable distance. And you would think it was run by some progressive type, maybe some woman in tech or something, but no. That company is majority owned and run by a German count. His surname is von, right? And he is a German count, real legitimate German aristocracy. I'm not kidding. The family owns castles and stuff and vineyards. A very moneyed man with a long history. So it's not a progressive sober type or a progressive fighting for sexual freedoms. He's a German count with everything that goes with that stereotype. And the thing is, because I cross the borders, right? I look like a kind of, thug. Let's face it. And people are surprised to learn that I'm not that. I look like it, that's a choice. I want to look like, I survived the gulag a little bit with my metal teeth and my tattoos and all my jewellery and beard and shaved head and all of that stuff. I look like I should not hold the values that I do. And that's what I look like to him. That's why the CEO liked me so much, is because he thought I was on his side as this straight presenting healthy white guy, but in fact my real sympathy lay with the underrepresented in the business. He thought that he could use me to speak to them and get them on his side, when in fact I wanted to rein him in. He liked me. until I betrayed him by establishing a union and alienated him. Eventually I backed off. It upset some members of the team so much. I had upset the boat so much. I think it's good to rock the boat, but it's not so good to rock the boat that it's in danger of falling over, of capsizing, and everybody falling into the water. And that was the state that we had got into right at the time that they were negotiating this $1.2 billion merger. And I had no idea that merger was happening. But the directors, I swear to God, were calling me crying, telling me to rescind this thing, to rescind this union. I had no idea why they were so emotionally invested, but it emerged afterwards that they were close in negotiations with various investors to seal this $1.2 billion pound merger, and this union that I was starting threatened to scare those investors away. And really, it was all because of my alcoholism. My desperation, my thrashing around, my lashing out repeatedly, it was all an expression of my unaddressed mental health issues, expressing them through alcohol, through relapses, through reckless sexual encounters, through desiring violence in Ukraine, through wanting to fight, and through picking fights with the management of a business which had done great by me, which had fought to protect me. In Germany, you can take a 6-week paid health leave for almost any reason. As long as you get a doctor to sign you off, you can disappear from the business. You can just go, and the company cannot fire you. Why would I want to start a union in Germany where workers already have so many rights? It's just beyond me. It was so stupid and poorly conceived. And I so deeply regret that my alcoholism pushed me to do this stupid thing and ruin my career for as long as it did. But more than that, I'm sad that it broke up my friendships that I had established. So, again, unknown to me, the same guy, John, who had hired me into Lelo, had fought for me to be kept on after my relapse in Zagreb, had fought for me to keep my job and to have the prospect of working again after my 8-month disappearing into the belly of the world for selfish reasons. He was also the guy who had once again hired me into Love Honey, once again fought for a position for me on his team. And in the background, he had taken some ownership of Love Honey, some equity in the business. He was valuable to the investors, and I had unknowingly threatened his equity by almost ruining the merger with the union, right? As far as the business was concerned, it would have been better if I was a dead British body on the Ukrainian battlefield. I'm certain of it. But that's not what happened. I chose to fight my own battle in Berlin, rather than, again, similar to leaving China on a bike to cycle alone, rather than deal with my problems. I had decided to pick a fight with the union in this $1.2 billion business in Germany. I decided to establish a union rather than seek treatment for my own problems. And no one liked it. All the young people in the business loved it, because they also saw what I saw in the management, that they were all straight white types. None of the professionals who'd been with the business before I joined, none of them liked it. And I understand now why. But really it had nothing to do with the business. It had all to do with my desire to drink myself into oblivion and pick unnecessary fights and to pick battles that weren't mine. All because, also at simultaneously expressing all of that through alcohol too. That was the reason. So after I took a month off, right? My binges had taken 2 weeks at a time, which was usually 10 days of drinking a bottle and a half of vodka, a big bottle and a half of vodka every day for 10 days and disappearing to a psych ward, and then for like 3 days, and then discharging myself thinking I was better, and then just appearing back in the office like nothing had happened. I got away with that several times. Until one day I disappeared in the end for 4 weeks, and the company told me to take the full 6 weeks, and I didn't. So I was off. I had slipped into a binge for a full 2 weeks, and then gone into the psych ward for a full 6 days, then discharged myself and immediately started binging again for another week, then stopped drinking, and then a day later I just showed up in the office because I didn't want to miss a team day, which was like a day of no work, but like throwing ideas around and stuff like that. I just turned up 4 weeks after going missing. Everyone now knowing that I had a problem with alcohol and mental health issues. I just showed up like nothing had happened, sat down in a meeting, started contributing creative marketing ideas and strategies like nothing had happened. And my line manager, not John wasn't there this day, but my line manager pulled me aside and said, listen, you shouldn't be here right now. You need to leave. For the sake of what comes next, you cannot be here. And we have to pretend that you didn't show up. She was surprised by me showing up. All my team members who were junior to me, or reported into me, they were delighted to see me, that I was okay, and that I'd come through the worst of it. But my line manager knew what was up. She was senior to me, and pulled me aside, get the fuck out. And then a week after that, at the end of my medical leave, I had to sit down with John. He called me into a cafe to do it in person, God bless him. And he said, look, I can't repair the damage that you've done. All I can do is tell you legally that there is no spot for you at the end of your medical leave. There is no longer a job waiting for you, and you'll be no longer welcome by the C-suite who felt, he didn't say this, but it was obvious. They felt betrayed by me, kind of flipping against them and trying to establish a union that threatened their merger. Perhaps understandably. I'm happy for my values and my principles, but bringing them to a business like that, it was not welcome. And it was made clear by John, who cried. His eyes filled up, and his eyes filled up as he asked me what I was going to do next. And I told him that I had already found another job, which was with some terrible PR agency, who had sent me an offer while I was on the way to that meeting. So I had a fallback. I knew I had to protect myself. I knew that I had threatened the business, and I had found another job in the time that it had taken them to decide to fire me. And, well, they never fired me. I never got fired. I was put on gardening leave for the remainder of the holiday that I had accrued, so another 5 weeks of gardening leave, what it was called, which is paid leave, which I immediately didn't take. I went straight to the other job. So I was drawing 2 salaries after I essentially got fired for a little while, living high on the hog, after everything that I had done, after still relapsing so many times, after not leaving my alcoholism behind, after hurting so many people, sleeping with so many people that I knew, betraying so many people, lying to so many people, letting so many people down. It was John, who had done nothing but fight for me throughout my adult life, who then had to tell me it was over. And I have spoken to him once since that day. And if you're close to my story, occasionally I drop hints about the one person that I have not had the nerve. It still gets me after all this time. That one person that I am yet to make amends with. There is one person that I need to leave it several more years. It's John, who I need to sit down in person and look him in the eye and tell him, I know what I did. I'm sorry for everything. Yeah. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how I lost the best job in the world because of my alcoholism. If you enjoyed it partially, if you found it even a little bit entertaining or interesting, or you have some empathy with my story, then please do like and subscribe so that YouTube knows that this content is kind of okay. If you really enjoyed it and you would like to get to know me more personally, or if you would just like to hang out with a group of like-minded, intelligent, articulate, sober people, or people trying to get sober, head over to my Patreon. There's a free tier for some kind of limited updates and behind the scenes stuff, and then a small kind of paid tier for which you get access to everything, including a kind of live chat and my Sunday update, which I thoroughly enjoy, and a whole bunch of writing, which I also enjoy, and the community there. Thank you, as always, for watching, for taking the time out of your day to watch this weird and wild, difficult to narrate story, and as always, good luck out there. Cheers.